What's going on, guys? This is Chandler Smith, and today we're going to be looking into kind of a funky property situation. Now, the reason this is so funky is I've done a ton of different things with this property. I've used it as a rental, I've lived in it, I've used it as a lease to own, I've renovated and sold it for a profit, and on top of all of that, I used it as a 1031 exchange property. So I'm going to dive into all of these different things, and if you haven't already, this is a video in a series of all of the different investments I've done, starting from my very first investment in real estate to now having over 60 doors of buy and hold real estate. So if you want, you can click the link right here to go to where all of the other properties are, so that you can see how I started from no properties and went up to over 60 doors worth of rental properties. And this video I'm really excited about because I've done so many different things with this house. It was kind of a little pet project for me to try a bunch of different stuff because I got it on a really good deal. And we're gonna jump into it and talk about all of these different things, the pros and cons, and all of the processes I took with this property to be able to make a ton of money off of it. So let's jump into it. This is a property that I bought here in Rexburg, and what's so interesting about this investment is it was the first property I ever purchased that I ended up living in. So I had almost 20 doors worth of buy and hold real estate before we ever got a property for ourselves. However, I have kind of a unique job that gave me the income to be able to invest in the properties I have, and at the time in my life where I bought this, I was still going out and knocking doors to sell pest control. So with this property, I bought it right before we went out for the summer, and I immediately rented it. Now, when we had purchased it, it was a 4-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, a nice living area, and I'll probably throw up some old pictures if we have them. So we rented it before the summer and actually bought it as an investment property, and I had been renting while having up to heck, I had acquired about 20 units worth of buy and hold real estate before we finally bought this property with the intention of eventually living in it. But because I would go out for the summer, I was in a situation where purchasing it, we bought it just a couple months before the summer. We didn't want to move in and leave it vacant. So what I actually did is I purchased the property, and then we got renters to put in it for before and during the summer. So we rented it to pay our mortgage and get a small cash flow. Now, after that situation, we got to a point where then when we got back from the summer, we were able to move in and make it our own resident. Now, if you're interested in the job that gave me the income to be able to get into it in the first place, you can check out a link in the description and go to www.elitesummersales.com to learn more about the job that really has opened all of these doors to give me the opportunity to invest in real estate. Now, this situation, I've rented the property, that's paid our mortgage while we were gone. I moved back in it, and me and my wife ended up living in it for probably about 6 months. Now, once we hit this point, we loved the house. We had time to renovate the basement, add an extra bedroom, a nice little living area, and an additional bathroom while we were living in it. And we got to the point where we said, hey, we'd actually like to upgrade the house we're living in, kind of put down roots in a different city 30 minutes from here. We decided we were gonna try and do this property on a lease to own option. Now, what this is where you're renting to someone, but they put down a much larger down payment as if they're purchasing the property. And a portion of their rent isn't necessarily rent. It's going to paying down the property if they can get to the point where they could eventually purchase it. That way, instead of just renting and throwing that money away, they know a small portion of it is going towards acquiring the property. And we were stoked on this because when you do a rent to own, obviously the return is huge because most of it is going to rent, but you've got the people paying for everything. They're taking care of all of the utilities, they're taking care of the insurance, the taxes, all of these different things as if they own it, but you're getting a big return, and they're happy because they're in a situation where they're at least moving towards home ownership. And I've done other videos about this you can check out. Now, what was so cool about our lease to own option is the person we originally did it with put down $5,000 when they got into the lease to own option. So now they're paying a monthly payment. They have $5,000 that's non-refundable unless they end up purchasing the property, and then that goes towards their purchase, which they had the intention of doing. So they did this lease to own option, and then they decided they no longer wanted to purchase the property about 5 to 6 months later. And so now they've got $5,000 that immediately is just a return for us, on top of the larger return we were making from their monthly payments, that also a portion was going to go to the purchase. They also took care of the property really nicely because they thought they were going to own it, but when they decided they wanted to purchase a different house, and they now had the freedom to, they ended up going a different direction. So now not only did we make the rents before we bought it, we had a place to live in while we renovated it, and now we're making rents. We now also had this $5,000 deposit because they changed their mind and decided they didn't want to do the lease to own option. So at this point, we'd made an incredible return on the property. We had bought the property for $215,000, which honestly was a great deal, but the whole rest of this neighborhood kind of grew up. And so with that happening, there was also a huge appreciation in home values in Idaho. When we looked at the fact that we'd renovated it, done all the work, and the neighborhood had really come along, we decided we wanted to sell it and 1031 those profits. What this means is we made all this extra money, but we can move it over without having to pay tax into another rental property. So originally I purchased this property for $215,000, but at this point we were able to sell it for $275,000. So we got this huge profit on top of the money we had tied up in the property already that we transitioned over into the purchase of a fourplex. So now we were in this situation where we could get into a fourplex that cost over $300,000 because of this property that we originally purchased for $215,000 because of all of the gains we'd acquired from the way that we did things. Not only that, but I learned a ton more about renting a single family residence. I learned a ton about lease to own options, and I learned a ton about the renovation, the fixing, the flipping. And so all around it was this awesome experience. We made mistakes along the way. We had extra bills we probably didn't need on the renovation. We had some miscommunication with the tenants where when we got back from the summer, we didn't get to immediately move in, which was a little bit of a snag when we got back, and I had to live in my parents' basement for a week or two, even though I had 20 other units I was renting to other people, which was super frustrating. But even with all these kinks, it was an awesome learning experience, and it gave us the chance to make a ton of money and move it over into another fourplex. There are so many different ways that you can capitalize and make a ton of money, learn a ton in the process, and get to the point where you create a huge passive income for yourself. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day. Nailed it, man. All right.